You keep telling yourself there's still time. Some part of you already knows that isn't true. You do the math without meaning to pass, subtracting your age from a number that feels important, and it never lands right. You think about the years you feel you've wasted. You just carry it die, a deadline nobody ever set for you. This isn't about proving whether you're behind. It's about something more dangerous. Poll what that feeling makes you do next. Because the decisions people make to erase the feeling of being behind are rarely the ones that catch them up.
Some cost more than the years they're reclaiming.
Because before we talk about what to do, we need to talk about where that deadline actually came from, to killed. And it isn't where you think it is. Notice where the deadline actually came from. Not from a bank statement. Not from a retirement calculator. It came from a moment height. A scroll, a conversation, a friend's new kitchen posted online, former classmate's promotion crossing your feed at exactly the wrong hour. That's the moment the countdown started. Not your birthday. Not some fixed point on a chart. A comparison. And within minutes, you're doing something you didn't plan to do. Thou. Opening an app you weren't going to check. Doing math you
didn't want to do. Ages function like checkpoints in a race nobody entered you into. 40 isn't a mathematical cliff.
It's a social one. A point where you're expected to have visible proof of having arrived somewhere.
And the proof isn't your actual position. It's the version of your position other people can see. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. Because the deadline in your head and the deadline in your accounts are not the same clock. One of them is running on your real numbers, your real timeline, your real capacity to keep building. The other is running on somebody else's highlight reel, somebody else's carefully edited update, somebody else's version of a milestone they may not have actually earned. You inherited that second clock. You didn't choose it. Nobody sat you down and explained the terms. It just started ticking somewhere in your 20s, and by the time you noticed it, it already felt like the truth. Here's what should worry you, though. Not that the clock is fake. Fake things are usually harmless high. You can just stop looking at them. What should worry you is what a fake deadline is capable of making a person do when they believe it's real. The deadline being fake wouldn't matter much if the fear it creates didn't push people towards something far more expensive than being behind. Here's the expensive thing. It's not overspending in general. It's a very specific category of spending, the kind bought not to build wealth, but to erase a feeling. Call it proof spending. A purchase whose real job isn't utility or growth. Its real job is to be seen. It's not the object. It's the announcement the object makes on your behalf, without you having to say a word. Shame doesn't want a plan. Shame wants relief. And it wants it now. A retirement account compounding quietly in the background doesn't feel like anything is happening. Nobody can see it. Nobody claps for it. So when the feeling of being behind gets loud enough, the mind reaches for something that resolves instantly and visibly instead. That's why the house sometimes gets upgraded the same year the panic sets in. Batal. Not because the family outgrew it, but because the house needed to finally match the title on someone's business card. That's why the car gets replaced the same month a peer gets the promotion, the announcement, the new title. Not because the old one broke down, but because showing up in it suddenly felt unbearable. That's why the aggressive bet appears call, the leveraged trade, the business launched overnight, The risk taken not because the odds were good, but because it promised to close the entire gap in one move. None of these decisions look irrational in the moment. Each one comes with a story that sounds responsible. But they share one quality. They spend money to change how a life looks, not to change what that life can actually afford later. There's a version of this decision that almost never gets talked about, Poddle. The one where the same person makes it more than once. It happens more than once because the relief never actually lasts. The house doesn't erase the feeling permanently tat. It erases it for a season, maybe a year, until the next comparison spike hits, and it always hits. A colleague's new title, a sibling's new address, a stranger's numbers posted for
Online with a caption that reads like an invitation to compare yourself. The trigger doesn't
have to be dramatic. It just has to land at the exact moment your guard is down. Once it lands, urgency takes over. Not urgency in the useful sense, Tal. Urgency in the sense that collapses your ability to evaluate anything properly. Suddenly, there isn't time to think this through. There's only time to fix the feeling. And fixing the feeling fast means choosing the visible option over the structural one, because visible options work immediately, and structural ones take years to show anything at all. There's no room left in that moment for the slower, quieter option to even be considered. So the fix gets made. Relief follows, real and immediate. And for a short window, it actually works. The feeling quiets down. You look, for a moment, caught up. But underneath that relief, something else has happened. The gap didn't close, it moved. The money that could have compounded went toward the fix instead. Which means the underlying shortfall is now larger than it was before the trigger ever hit. And because it's larger, the next comparison spike lands with more force. On a person who now has less room left to absorb it. The shame that seemed to disappear was never gone. It was only waiting for the next trigger to call it back. This is the loop. Trigger, urgency, visible fix, temporary relief, a wider gap, a harder trigger next time.
Most people never name it, so they never notice they're inside it. They just experience it.
As a string of separate, reasonable decisions, each one making sense on its own. That's precisely what makes the loop so effective, Cal. No single decision inside it ever feels like the mistake. This is closer to the real definition of falling behind than any number on a chart. Falling behind isn't a position.
It's a loop that keeps resetting itself at a worse starting point every time. The loop doesn't just cost money.
It quietly spends the one thing you can't refinance, borrow, or catch up on later.
What the loop spends isn't just money. It spends time purred. Specifically, the years your money would have needed to actually
solve the problem you're panicking about. And time, unlike money, cannot be borrowed, refinanced, or negotiated back into existence once it's gone. Here's the part that makes this a genuine trap, rather than just a bad habit. The value of fixing a real financial shortfall depends almost entirely on how many years are left for that fix to compound. A small, steady action taken today is worth more than a large, dramatic action taken later, because today's action has more years ahead of it to grow. That's not opinion. That's how compounding works. Time in the market, time in the account, time left before you need the money pull. That's the actual asset, not the amount you start with. Now look at what a shame-driven decision actually does to that asset. A large new fixed payment fry, the upgraded house, the newer car, the ping, doesn't just cost the sticker price. It removes free cash flow for years, sometimes decades, cash flow that would otherwise have gone toward the one thing
that could have closed the real gap. A hasty, aggressive bet made to catch up fast.
doesn't just risk losing money. If it fails, and these bets fail more often than the story promises, it can erase years of prior progress in a single event. And simply abandoning the plan altogether to you, it deciding it's hopeless, so why bother bow, spends the years just by leaving them empty. None of this looks like sabotage while it's happening. It looks like ambition. It looks like finally taking action after years of standing still. That's what makes it so effective at destroying the very thing it claims to protect. Paul. It never announces itself as the enemy of your future. It announces itself as decisiveness. This is the double bind, and it's worth sitting with. You feel behind. That feeling demands a fix.
The fix you reach for under pressure is almost always the one that spends your remaining runway.
Instead of protecting it. So the person doesn't just fail to catch up. They actively shorten the only window in which catching up was ever mathematically possible. The shame doesn't just fail to solve the problem.
It works against the one lever that actually could have. And this is where two people, standing in nearly identical moments,
quietly split. Both feel the exact same tightness in the chest. Both feel the exact same pull toward doing something, anything, right now. The spike itself doesn't distinguish between them at all. What distinguishes them is what happens in the 60 seconds after the spike hits. Two people can feel the exact same shame spike in the exact same week. Only one of them turns it into a decision they can't undo. What separates them isn't willpower, and it isn't financial knowledge either. It's one question, asked in the 60
seconds that matter, before the decision hardens into something permanent. Is this decision trying to make the shame go away?
Or is it trying to protect the years I have left? Say it out loud in your head, but in the exact moment the pressure builds, and notice how uncomfortable it is to answer honestly. That discomfort is the point.
It's the same discomfort the loop has been helping you avoid every single time. That's it. That's the entire tool.
No formula, no spreadsheet, no benchmark to look up first. Just an honest answer to a question about motive. It works because of what it interrupts. Urgency thrives on skipping evaluation entirely. It wants the decision made, before anyone asks why. The question forces a pause exactly where the loop needs there to be none. And because it asks about motive rather than about numbers, you don't need to know your net worth,
your savings rate, or anyone else's benchmark to answer it honestly. You already know, underneath, which one you're doing.
You've always known. The question just makes you stop and actually look at the answer
before you act on it. This is where most advice gets it backward. Most advice hands you a system.
It's a checklist, a set of rules to follow so you don't have to think. But a checklist can be
gamed by shame just as easily as anything else. Podos. You can follow every rule on a list and still be spending your runway to look caught up. A question can't be gamed the same way, because it always sends you back to the same place. What am I actually trying to buy right now? Notice what this tool doesn't require. It doesn't require a 5-year plan. It doesn't require you to catch up
to anyone by any particular date. It doesn't require the visible proof that shame keeps demanding sane.
The upgrade, the announcement, the win, everyone can see. It only requires a moment of honesty, heated every time the spike hits. That's precisely why it will never feel as satisfying as the fix it's replacing.
Asking the question doesn't produce a new car in the driveway or a bigger number to mention at dinner.
It produces something quieter, a runway left intact, still there, still compounding, still yours to use. But there's still one deadline left that's actually real eternal, and it has nothing to do with your age. The real deadline is not a birthday, it's a moment. The moment a person stops making decisions to relieve shame.
Starts making them to protect their own runway. Some people cross that line at 25, quietly, with no announcement.
Some people never cross it, not at 40, not at 70, no matter how much money passes through their hands. Age was never the axis that mattered. It just felt like it was, because age is easy to measure, and clarity isn't. Think back to that comparison moment, Tofrim, the one that started all of this, the conversation, or the scroll, or the update that made your stomach drop. Consider, now, what was probably happening on the other side of it. The person who seemed to have it figured out may have been mid-loop themselves.
In the exact same spiral, just at a different stage of it, performing arrival instead of having actually arrived.
Visible success and real position are not the same measurement, and you already know that. Because you just spent this entire video learning to tell them apart. That's the part almost nobody says out loud. Looking ahead and being ahead are two completely different things, and the whole economy of comparison depends on you never checking which one you're actually looking at. The people who look furthest ahead are sometimes the ones who have simply gotten best at looking like they're ahead, Jay. It's a skill that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with performance. None of this means stop wanting more. It means noticing precisely what a decision is actually for before you make it irreversible.
This isn't a call to relax, or to stop checking your numbers, or to pretend ambition is dangerous.
It's a call to separate two things that shame keeps fusing together. Wanting a better life and needing to prove, right now, to someone who probably isn't even paying attention, that you already have one. You will feel that spike again, probably soon. Some comparison, some update, some moment that makes the old deadline
Feel real again for a few seconds. When it happens, you won't need a benchmark, and you won't need permission.
You'll just need the one question, asked honestly, before the decision hardens. The next time it happens, you'll know it's happening. What you do in that moment is the only deadline that was ever real.